Hello and welcome into the Touchdown NFL podcast with myself, Lee, and we've also got Willow here for week 9. We're properly into the season, aren't we? Halfway. I suppose you could say it's the other halfway, as we were kind of writing a couple of our articles last week. But wait, how are you? How are you doing? Got a few interesting things to talk about this evening.
It flies by, doesn't it? Last week I couldn't believe I was talking about it being halfway through the season, and now it's over halfway through the season. I appreciate that, it's a short season anyway, but it certainly doesn't feel like we've had 9 weeks worth of football. And I guess one of the I keep banging on about the extended playoff situation, but one of the benefits of it is that 9 weeks in, it seems like 3/4 of the league is still in some sort of playoff race, which is quite interesting. So it's flying by. It was good. It was a good weekend. Another one of those long ones where it kicked off at 2:30. So I was commandeering the TV for the entire day, which made me incredibly popular. And do it all again Sunday. But no, good. You?
Yeah, good. It's funny, isn't it? From a couple of points of view. First of all, I really like the 2:30 game over here. It obviously might not be great for people in the States who are getting up really early, especially on the West Coast. But I feel like, if there's not a Premier League game that you want to watch at that time, it's just great, and it just sets you up for the rest of the day. And if there's good games like there was throughout all, in each time slot like there was yesterday, it's perfect. It really sets you up, especially when it was a good game, and we'll talk about the Chiefs Dolphins a little bit later on. And I feel like as well the season is really into it, and maybe like you say, it's just because everyone is involved still at this, or maybe not everyone, maybe that's overegging it a little bit, but a lot more teams are involved and still have a lot of things to play for. It does seem like there's a lot on the line each week, in terms of jockeying for playoff position and things like that. And so I was a bit skeptical of the 7th playoff spot when it happened a few years ago. But yeah, like you say, it's making for a good season. And I don't know if it's flying by just because we're getting so wrapped up with our teams and the ups and the mainly downs of our teams at the moment. And you don't kind of realize, because you're kind of so hyper focused on one team, but you don't realize that there's so much going on in some senses until you do take a step back, maybe to do this or other things that you do, and you just think wow, it's like we have gone past 9 weeks in a flash, it seems.
I mean, ups and downs. I'll get onto the downs in a bit. But I fully concur with the 2:30 or the 1:30 or whatever it is, depending on the time zone kickoff, especially when you're not going sitting in one place for 10 hours or whatever was great. My NFL Sunday very much ends at about 11:30 because I can't do the Sunday night. I can't. I've been there as a younger man and been able to stay up until 4:30 and get up again for a 9 o'clock start, but I can't do that anymore. So, to have that extra game feels nice, and I'm sure there are going to be people in the States that enjoy having the 9 a.m. start all the way through to about 10:30 p.m. What a day that is. It was a good weekend. It's a good week by and large.
No, absolutely. And a couple of things that we want to kick off with before we get into our usual segments is, obviously it was announced just before the Frankfurt game. Obviously there's going to be a game in Spain, maybe Brazil, being talked about, and I'm trying to kind of get your thoughts on almost that expansion. I think we talked about it in the past. This is what the 17th game is going to be for every team to play abroad in some way, shape, or form. I just wanted to get your thoughts on what you thought. Obviously, we've got the Frankfurt games this week and obviously next with the Colts and Patriots, which seems like a bit of an anticlimax now after the Chiefs and Dolphins, doesn't it? But I'm sure it'll surprise us in some way. But obviously you've been to wait for Wembley games this year and things like that. What do you think about this expansion, and what do you think of the potential locations as well?
Yeah, no, I mean, Madrid has been on the cards for a little while, right? So I remember reading a translated Barca article from 2019 before the Real Madrid Bernabeu sort of renovation expansion sort of kicked off, and one of the things that they were pushing was the multi-use aspect of it. Beyond just football and concerts, it was going to be sort of tennis championships and basketball and NFL, and that's kind of stuck in my mind ever since then. And every time they talk about the next kind of location, because obviously the NFL is ultimately a capitalist endeavor, so they're just going to continue to expand until there's no more land for them to play on, and then possibly out into space. A game on the moon every October is going to be insane. But it feels like it feels like a natural kind of home for it, and the international marketing rights initiative obviously allow teams to home themselves within different countries. And I know there's a lot of talk, I've noticed a lot of talk this weekend about the possibility of the Chicago Bears being a home team in Madrid next season, which if that does come to pass, doesn't necessarily surprise me. That the Bears are pretty well supported across the country, or across the world, as best I can tell. Again, Brazil is another one where it's just kind of like, in terms of an iconic like venue, Americana, you can't get much more kind of iconic. I watched the Copa Libertadores final on Saturday evening, and it's just kind of like it's amazing. The language behind what Goodell was saying in the interview that he did with Neil Reynolds, I found interesting, was how he kind of talked about the speed in which they want to expand. Like there are 3 games in England every year. That's just what they're contracted for. There's a minimum of 1 game in Germany. There'll probably be 2 again next year. Another game in either Spain or Brazil, possibly both. I imagine Mexico will come into the play with the Aztecas redevelopment sort of concluding fairly soon. And then, as you say, we're looking at that 17th game is just going to be used every season. You're going to have a moment where every single team is playing abroad every year. And I think that's ultimately what the NFL is trying to get to. Probably teams playing multiple games abroad. As an international fan, I don't hate it. I can fully see both sides. I think I've been on this podcast before and said that I was initially against the idea and then got into it when I actually started going. I don't hate the expansion, and as somebody who supports one team quite a lot, I quite like the idea of going to countries that are quite close to me to see them. I've never been to Germany, and I'd really like to go to Germany. And if the Falcons are there, then that's a great excuse to. Never been to Spain, and I quite like to that sort of thing. But yeah, as I say, the NFL exists to make money for its billionaire owners, and I think they've largely exhausted the avenues they can do that at home. You've got an untapped literal world of opportunity away from the States. It's going to suck for the fans in the States when games like Chiefs Dolphins, which we will get onto because we have to, because it was great and it's like 2 really good teams, but like that could have been. That's a game that if you're a Chiefs fan, you want to be going to that, because that's like vital. If you're a Dolphins fan and you live in Kansas City, that's like, man, what a missed opportunity. Either way, but beside the point, it's going to happen. There is going to be some pushback to it from all sides, I imagine. But if the NFL wants to grow itself as a sport, or wants to grow the sport rather, sort of internationally, it's going to need initiatives such as this. It's going to need the Olympics. Obviously, American flag football is going to be in the Olympics. It needs that to be successful, and yeah, we'll see where it goes. It might just lead to, I don't know where. I always end up working my way into where's it going to lead to. It could lead anywhere, but right now it feels like it's going to lead to every team's playing abroad at least once a year in the next 5 years. That's where I feel we're at.
Yeah, I think so as well. I think it's just a slow creep, isn't it, of this expansion? You know, it was the UK, now it's the UK and Germany, and these other countries are probably, you know, the next on the list, right? You know, and then it's going to, like you say, expand even further. You know, we've already done Mexico at some point. And in the recent past, there's Ireland, who's been hosting college games. They could host an NFL game quite easily, you know. And like you say, everyone in Europe is probably going to be thinking exactly what you've just said. You know, there's plenty of opportunity to go to nearby countries and see, you know, NFL football, and that's a huge market for the NFL to tap into. You know, the whole of Europe. So lots of people with expendable cash that, you know, can do that. You know, and that's music there is, isn't it? So that's probably what's going to happen. And it means that you still get that nice even 8 home games, 8 road games, and then you 1 neutral site game, I guess. That would mean that no team will kind of complain that, oh, we've been giving up too many home games, for this to happen or something like that. Obviously you got the Jags who don't mind obviously doing that because they're sort of wedded to the UK for a long time, and that's been the kind of the guinea pig for it, really, hasn't it, in terms of how well it's gone. And we've seen the expansion of that even this year in terms of the Jags staying over here for multiple weeks and playing back to back and not having a bye week immediately after and all that sort of stuff. It's all just testing the water for this to, like you say, happen probably in the next 5 years or so. It's interesting. It's great. It's great to have different markets involved. And like you say, the players, as much as they're probably told to be positive about it, do seem to enjoy it. As much as you often find that there's one team who comes out really early and one team comes out literally at the last minute. Guess like going back to what we were talking about the other week in terms of like teams coming out early. When we talk about the Jags coming out earlier, the Chiefs obviously came out the last minute and played quite well, especially at the beginning of the game. So that kind of put a cat amongst the pigeons in terms of that kind of thought train in terms of how well teams play early on, depending on when they come out and things like that. But yeah, it's all a big experiment, isn't it? Because like you say, it's going to happen. And it's going to be probably even further than Europe at some point,
Yeah. Yeah. You're absolutely right. But just on the player thing, I don't know if you saw Marquez Valdez-Scantling was asked about coming over to Germany. His response made me laugh so much. So that sucks. I've got to find a dog sitter for a few days. And it's like, oh, poor Marquez Valdez-Scantling. Got to find a dog sitter. My heart bleeds. But yeah, no, I mean, it's going to happen, and you're right. It's going to go beyond Europe. It's going to go beyond South America. It's going to go into all reaches of the world. We're going to obviously see this regularly. It's going to be how much they can kind of get away with, because that's just how it always is. But for now, it's working, and it's. I think they know that it works. Obviously, London was the first to have the regular season game, and they had a very slow increase from one and then 2 games and then 3 games, and then they tried 4 for a bit, and I think they found the sweet spot with 3. But Germany, they were very willing to just throw 2 games in at the first opportunity. It's like, okay, the first game could have sold out 5 times over. Let's just throw. It'll be 3 next year probably or something like that. But yeah, the expansion is gonna keep coming. We're gonna get this game next week, which feels more like a London game than it does a Germany game. The Colts versus the maligned Patriots very much feels like a game that could be played out at Wembley Stadium, rather than what they had last year and what they had yesterday. Yeah. No, I can see. I keep repeating myself and rambling at this point, but I can see both sides. But ultimately, I see the benefits and the negatives, and I'm largely on board. So
yeah. Just final thing on this, I guess, is that the Germany game, I would say, versus the Wembley game or the UK games, has a really good atmosphere, and that is something that we could take from, because I'm not overly impressed with the UK atmosphere a lot of the time. But it seemed to be that everyone was having a great time in Germany yesterday in Frankfurt, and not to say that they weren't in the UK, but I don't know. It just strikes me as that it's always got a bit more to it when they're in Germany. But yeah, and long may that continue, and if that can spread through the other venues and the other places that they choose to expand to, then I'm all for it, because at the end of the day, it's a spectacle, and that's what we're all here for. Because at the end of the day, whether that game was in Kansas City, Miami, or Frankfurt yesterday, it was always going to be on my TV. So I guess for people who consume it in that sense, then that's apart from being in a different time slot, is exactly the same product, I guess, and it's always better with a better atmosphere surrounding that product. So, and then the other thing that I wanted to mention, just before we get into things, is the video that's been going around on social media from the Raiders locker room with them smoking cigars after beating the 2-win Giants. I just wanted to kind of mention this in terms of why? I know that you mentioned quite a lot of the time, who are these people? Who is this team? Who are they to do this? I don't understand. What is the thinking behind this? I know you're going to kind of touch on this in your article in the midweek, but what's your thoughts on this? Because it's bizarre.
Yeah. So I can't quite tell if this is the Raiders enjoying the win against the Giants, or if it's the Raiders enjoying the win over the Giants, immediately after ridding themselves of Josh McDaniels. There's a piece in the New York, I'm gonna get it, I think it's the New York Post, whereby literally a day before he got fired, there was a sort of an all teams meeting where Josh McDaniels was just hounded by the coaching staff and the playing staff to just change, to just be different. And then he gets fired, and obviously the Raiders fans are delighted because the Raiders have been pretty awful last 2 years. And then they're putting out videos about fans have got to come down. We're really fired up, and it's just kind of like, man, the spell the Patriot way has over the NFL to create an atmosphere that made you so actively dislike this one person that you would, in my opinion, decide to celebrate a fairly routine win against. I feel so bad for Tommy DeVito because he should not be in this situation. But like to win as well as you did, and then celebrate it like it's the greatest win of all time, I think says more about where they were at a week ago than it does what they did sort of yesterday. That being said, it did remind me very much of a week ago when the Denver Broncos decided to celebrate beating the Kansas City Chiefs with fireworks and and sort of Taylor Swift as the soundtrack. So maybe it's just teams in the AFC West being a bit weird. I don't know. Yeah. Either way, it's a choice, and that's all I can say about it. It's a choice.
I think you're pretty much spot on. But yeah, this is just something I wanted to kind of mention because it's kind of strange. But yeah, let's get into our main segments here. So we're going to go and talk about our biggest takeaway, our talking point of the weekend. I'll kick this one off. Last week I was ready to start the conversation on whether AJ Brown was the best wide receiver in football. I'm willing to have a pretty similar conversation now about whether the Ravens are the best team in the league right now. They, absolutely disposed of Seattle at the weekend, holding the Seahawks to 3 points. Lamar, at this point, is quite obvious an MVP candidate. Todd Monken, who I was excited to see Lamar with, it's all working great for him. The offense is absolutely flying, and all Baltimore Ravens fans want to protect Mike Macdonald at all costs, as he's going to be a huge head coach candidate front runner in the offseason, alongside a couple of others. But his defense is playing out of his mind right now. I feel like because of all, and we're just as guilty as everyone else as this, because of all the talk of the Dolphins throughout the season so far, and obviously the usual furore surrounding the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and the Eagles to a certain degree, although they do have a better record. I feel like the Ravens have got a little bit unnoticed somewhat so far. I just think they're absolutely rolling right now. And, it's kind of drawn my attention to it even more this weekend because I thought that was going to be quite a close game. Obviously, it was on Sky in the UK as well. I was really excited for this game. It was just completely one-sided. So, yeah, and it just highlights as well the AFC the AFC North, excuse me. I've mentioned this a couple of times, but it's just an insane division. All four teams at the moment, if the season's finished now, would be in the playoffs. All four teams got a winning record. Side note, Mike Tomlin is a wizard because how the Steelers have got 5 wins on the board with Matt Canada, Kenny Pickett, et al. Running the offense is insane. But I'm talking about the Ravens right now. Ravens are, like I say, the best team in the league. In my opinion, at the moment, I'm just willing to say that, and pretty much like the AJ Brown take from last week, I'm not sure it's that spicy of a take anymore. Maybe I'm a week too late on that one.
No, it's definitely an agreeable take. I've been on the sort of the Ravens. It wasn't necessarily a hype train because they didn't have a great deal of hype surrounding them. They're a weird team because they've never had any sort of hype surrounding them. Well, coming into the season, it was the Bengals and the Bills and the Chiefs. And as the season's gone on, you look at the games that they've kind of lost, and they've all been weird losses that you can't really put on kind of one player. They blew the Seattle Seahawks out of the water. Just as an aside, right? I appreciate absolutely torching a team offensively, and that they did. I've got Lamar Jackson in 2 fantasy teams, and he put up like just over 10 points in both of them. Like how do you score that many points and look that good going forward and not capitalize on it just to spite me specifically? But no, they're really good. They've got a really good quarterback. They've got a really good defense. They've got the greatest kicker ever, and they just keep churning wins out. Sometimes impressively, sometimes not so impressively. I mean, we saw them. I saw them firsthand a couple of weeks ago, obviously in London, and then they looked really good, but just couldn't score points. And they're just a really good team, really well coached team. Like you say about the AFC North, that's a balmy division, and I echo entirely your sentiments about Mike Tomlin, because there's nothing that the Pittsburgh Steelers have got. Full stop. Actually, they've got nothing apart from the ability to just win games, apparently, which is the best ability of all. But I do like the Ravens. I do like the Ravens a lot. I like the Ravens a lot more than I do some teams with better records than them. I feel if you were to put the Ravens in any situation against any team, I would be hard pressed to bet against them, because they just are good. And I can only assume that the reason why they're not talked about in the same way that the Chiefs are, or the Bengals are, or the Bills, or whoever, the Eagles or whatever, is because they just don't seem to have these huge sort of highlight reel kind of plays. Everything they do is really efficient. You'll get Lamar Jackson sort of rattling off a run every now and then, and sort of making a pass that everybody says that he can't make, even though he can make all of the passes. But they're just a really efficient team going about their business, and they're just kind of sneaking up on people. I like it. I like them as that team. Yeah, I agree with you. I think I agree with you. I like them a lot.
Yeah, Lamar just this season, he's just been so efficient. Like, his completion percentage is ridiculous. He was 80% this week, and I feel like he's had several games this season where his completion percentages have been super high. Like against Detroit, for example, I think he was like close to 80%. I think it was pretty similar stats to this one. And he's just piloting that offense so efficiently, and just like you say, almost without garnering loads of attention. Because when Lamar came into the league, obviously he was this rushing quarterback who was faster than everyone, and you would see a lot of his highlights being like running plays, which obviously dawned or sort of gave birth to the kind of not bad for a running back kind of thing that Lamar likes to bring up every now and then, and kind of that goes back to his draft, pre-draft process and things like that. But now he's like a quarterback who's like an excellent passer, and like they just piloting the offense so well. I feel like because of the fact that if you look at Lamar's box score, he had less than 200 yards, he didn't throw for a touchdown. Like I say, it just doesn't garner loads of attention, draw loads of attention to it, does it? People are going to be talking about CJ Stroud. We might even talk about him later. Where he's like throwing for 500 yards and 5 touchdowns, and willing his team to win. Lamar's like steamrolling people, but doing it with efficiency, and the Ravens are doing it with defense, and it's not completely one-sided. Loads of offense that's taking the headlines. But I think that's it, and that's why they're kind of sneaking up on people, really.
Yeah, I mean, I always go back to I remember sort of walking up to when Spurs a couple of weeks ago, and the conversation being around Lamar Jackson. I've got a mate who's very not anti Lamar. He likes Lamar Jackson, but he likes to wind people up about Lamar Jackson. And they just lost to the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he'd thrown like an interception right at the end, and it was like, but he was perfect. Like Lamar Jackson was like he every single pass was absolutely perfect, and his receivers could not catch the ball. And then the one pass that is just like errant is picked off, and it's just like that's him. That's just him. He's just like he does things really well. He's a really good quarterback, and I really want to get past the pre-draft stuff, because it was ages and ages ago now, where it was like he needs to convert into a wide receiver, or he needs to try his hand at being a gadget sort of running back type thing. And it was just like that was never sort of fair or reason. It always came from a place of sort of a complete lack of understanding of what Lamar Jackson is good at. And I don't think he could have landed at a better organization to realize where he is. I mean, in terms of a model organization, they just pick players because they're good. They've got no interest in where you're playing. If you're good at football, you're playing, kind of thing. Which obviously draft standing be damned, or whatever, or draft value be damned, and the like. But listen, he's won an MVP already. He's got to be in that conversation just purely on the fact that the Ravens can beat anybody. Be that, they can probably beat teams multiple ways as well. We've blown out the Seattle Seahawks, who have been good this season. They've squeaked out wins earlier in the season. They're going to be in that conversation. I feel confident in saying they're going to be a team playing into January, and hopefully they can sort of in that time rack up a couple of sort of statement wins, just to put people on notice a little bit, and then people start coming out and going, "Yeah, I've always believed in the Ravens," and I'm like, "No, you didn't. No, you didn't. You weren't there in week 9."
That's kind of what I'm doing. I'm kind of planting my flag a little bit in terms of, I was like I said, I think I'm like maybe a week late on it, because I feel like a few people are saying this sort of thing now. But here I am saying that they're one of the best teams, if not the best team in the league. And it's weird because, like you say, Lamar's been an MVP, so it's kind of weird that he doesn't kind of just get that automatic attention. They do have a couple of opportunities for statement wins. They've got the 49ers on Boxing Day. They've got the Dolphins on New Year's Eve. Play the Bengals again, obviously, in division game. So they've got a couple more opportunities for statement wins. So yeah, we'll see how they go with that as they move through the rest of the season. But yeah, like I say, definitely going to be in the playoffs. Like, absolutely primed for a deep playoff run for sure.
I think that's the one thing. Just to last word for me on Lamar Jackson. The one thing that people have on him at this stage is the stage in which the Ravens are kind of out. They had that season where they were just blowing the doors off of everybody. It was the league MVP, and then they got knocked out in the first round that they were in against the Titans, I want to say. So it's just kind of like wins aren't a quarterback statistic. That's a totally unfair measurement of whether or not a player is good or not. But if that's the one thing that people are going to hold against him, then I suppose the Ravens are going to have to sort of make a run. They're in a good position as anybody to make a run.
Yeah, I completely agree. They could be in the mix for the 1 seed for sure. But we'll kind of come on to that when we come on to it further down the line. I'm going to hand the mic figuratively over to yourself now.
All right. Falcons minute. Here we go. I said before we start recording, I really do try and keep the Atlanta Falcons out of this thing because it's just sad. But I've got to use my what I learned this week. As what I learned this week is that Arthur Smith is probably unredeemable as the Atlanta Falcons head coach. I think it's probably over. They made the decision after last week, after losing to a rookie quarterback against a team that had just traded their best defensive player that had injuries all over the gaff, to move to Taylor Heineke as the starter for this week against the Minnesota Vikings, who had just lost their quarterback. Don't have Justin Jefferson, playing a rookie because they've just traded for Joshua Dobbs. This was a good opportunity to right the ship and to get back on track, and they did not do anything like that. They looked totally ill-prepared. They looked totally inconsistent. I don't think Taylor Heineke is a very good quarterback, full stop, but he's probably a better option than Desmond Ridder is right now. The fact that this is before. I want Arthur Smith to be fired. The point of the point is I want Arthur Smith to be fired because I've kind of had enough. But when he got hired with General Manager Terry Fontenot, it was, we have no money because we have so much money tied up with Matt Ryan and Julio Jones for the next 2 years. We just got to ride it out, try and build a culture, and then we're going to be in a position. We've done that. We've had 2 years of 7-10 records, and we've got money. We've gone out and spent it on a defense, but they've decided to hitch their wagon to a third-round quarterback who played 4 games against backups last season, and perennial backup Taylor Heineke. This was an inexcusable performance this weekend. I don't know how much of it you've seen because it's two bad teams. But the Minnesota Vikings started a rookie quarterback who got injured on the first drive or the second drive, so they had to bring in a guy that they traded for 3 days earlier. Like, he's living out of a suitcase right now. He hasn't. Forget about like knowing the playbook. He doesn't know his teammates' names. And Joshua Dobbs just torched a Falcons defense, which is allegedly good. Absolutely. And the Falcons had plenty of opportunities to win. They had the ball in the red zone multiple times and decided that it's going to be screen passes to Jonnu Smith, and we're going to do sort of little shovels and end arounds, and it's all just kind of nonsense. I wrote a thing for a site that I was working on a few years ago during the pandemic that Arthur Smith was going to be the perfect head coach for the Atlanta Falcons because of how efficient the Tennessee Titans red zone offense was in the 2 years he was their head coach. And it's not just Derrick Henry. Well, it turns out it was just Derrick Henry, because this man does not know how to run a red zone offense. As far as I can tell, the Falcons ranked bottom by a billion miles in terms of scoring points in the red zone. Just as well, they've got Younghoe Koo, who has sorted out his early season yet and is just knocking the ball through wherever he's asked to. And then they lose to, again, a team without Justin Jefferson, a team without Kirk Cousins. They're playing a guy who was in Arizona at the start of the week. I mean, the stories coming out today, yesterday when this goes live, are he's literally on the sideline asking his teammates, "What does this mean?" when the coach calls this play, and I'm just ranting about this one game now. The wider point is, for the last 2 seasons, we've started 4-5. We are in season 3 of a 3-year project, and we are 4-5, looking significantly worse. We've tried the quarterback change. It didn't necessarily work. It doesn't appear that Desmond Ridder's getting his job back sort of this week, sort of anytime soon. So it's another week of Taylor Heineke, who, again, it's a kind of an unfair position to put him in. But when you've spent the last 3 years deciding that you're going to stock up your team with first-round offensive talent, Kyle Pitts, Drake London was injured, obviously, this week, Bijan Robinson, and then your leading receiver is Jonnu Smith, and your leading running back is Tyler Algier, you kind of have to ask, well, what is the point? You're giving up first-round picks for the most expensive or the most talented decoys in the NFL. That's not necessarily an Arthur Smith issue. He's not the one overseeing the draft process, but he's the one coaching these guys. And if you couldn't turn Kyle Pitts, generational tight end that he was supposed to have been, into anything more than a guy getting 2 or 3 targets a game, you're not a very good coach. So yeah, as far as I'm concerned, the Arthur Smith era in Atlanta is probably as done as it's probably done. They'll get to the end of the season. The thing that's fortunate for him is that the NFC South is bad. Obviously, we saw the Buccaneers lose in a hilarious fashion. And the Saints are just a weird team at the moment. They've got to play the Saints twice. If you can't get to the playoffs off of this schedule, you can't get to the playoffs at all. And there has to be an understanding that a change, somebody else has to be able to get more out of these players than Arthur Smith is. That's my rant. That's where I'm going. I don't know if that made any sense. That's entirely off the top of the dome. But yeah, Arthur Smith, this was the week where I kind of realized that it probably wasn't going to be something that could be turned around.
It makes a lot of sense, because I feel like when you sort of mentioned that article that you wrote a while ago, obviously I'm not familiar with the article. I can kind of see where you were coming from just with the headlines that you've kind of given me, though. And it kind of leads me to a couple of questions, really, in the fact that first of all, why hasn't this worked? Because, you've got Arthur Smith, you've got his history in Tennessee with heavy run offense, and he's obviously tried to implement that sort of thing in Atlanta. The Falcons have a good stable of running backs, headlined by Bijan Robinson, who everyone was excited to have in the league. I personally, before the draft, was saying no one's drafting that high because I'm not a running back sort of in the first round kind of guy. But if there was anyone anywhere that this is going to be fun, it's going to be Atlanta. And then it happened. And I was like, oh shit, things like that generally don't happen. It's kind of like a Madden thing. Then it happened. And then they just don't use him. And I get the fact that you can't just give him every single carry and every single play. And you've got Algier, you've got Cordero Patterson, and you've got other mouths to feed in terms of pass catching as well. But they don't seem to do that either because Pitts, and I know I'm like singing to the choir here in saying this, but why is that? Why, just for anyone who's not followed Atlanta as closely as you will have over the past couple of years that Arthur Smith's been the head coach, like why aren't they just like scheming touches for Kyle Pitts? Why aren't they just, obviously Drake London does get utilized quite a lot, but why isn't Bijan getting like most carries? Or is Arthur Smith just not said that?
So he's asked about it a lot. He is asked for the last three seasons. It's been what's the thinking behind Kyle Pitts not being as involved as he as you might expect. It's been why is Bijan not getting the carries? And his stock answer is, we're not here to play fantasy football. We're here to win games. Which right at the start in 2021. That came across as a bit of I quite like that. That's quite defiant, It's like, we don't care about your standing. We're here to win games, and we don't care how we do it, kind of thing. But we're not.
Got to win
like
games
you can,
for that to be kind of sticking, right?
You can say that if you're 7-2 and you're just grinding these games out, but you're 4-5 with the easiest schedule in the NFL, with some of the most highly touted talents in the draft process over the last 5 years. And you're just not getting them the ball. And I do not know. Like, Kyle Pitts is a little bit kind of, he had a knee injury last season, which he missed half the year, and he hasn't looked 100% this year. So it's kind of like you don't want to throw him in 100% because he's still coming back. He's always been a little bit lightweight. He's not much of a blocking tight end, but you don't draft him to be a blocking tight end. You draft him because he's 6'6" and can run really, really fast and can catch everything. Like, they drafted him and they just lost Julio Jones, and you've gone, right, well, there's your Julio Jones replacement straight away. And they've just gone, nah, we want you to inline blocking, and we're going to get the ball to Alameda Zacchaeus. And it's kind of like, what are we doing? There's also part of me that feels as if Arthur Smith feels like he has a point to prove. He's very famously the son of the guy that owns FedEx. So like he's when you think the Smith sort of family legacy is not tied to Arthur Smith being a success in Atlanta. It's very much, this guy sends packages everywhere, and this guy's son can do NFL stuff. So it almost feels as if he's constantly trying to prove that he is more than who he is, and that he is actually the smartest guy in the room, and he is the smartest guy in the room because he's getting the ball to Cardell Hodge and Scotty Miller and all these. But at some point, you have to realize that the smart thing is just doing the easy thing. Like, the smart thing doesn't have to be the hard thing all the time. You've drafted these players to make it easy for yourself. You drafted these players to make it easy for a quarterback to come in and just sort of hit the ground running. And clearly that's not worked. But at that point, you've got to go, well, how much of that is on me? Like, how much of that is Arthur Smith making it too difficult on himself and, by proxy, Desmond Ridder or Taylor Heineke? So to answer your question, we really would like Kyle Pitts to get more touches, and Bijan Robinson to get more touches, and ideally to win some games. And just to kind of stop the bravado kind of chest out, I'm not here to make friends in the fantasy community kind of thing, because it's not about that. It's about winning games. Like, we've been bad forever, but we have like flashes of being good sometimes. Just give us something. Just give us something to kind of cling on to for a little bit, because it's just going to fall apart again. And if you can't do it, go and get somebody who can, because there are lots of really talented offensive coordinators who are due a head coaching shot. There are lots of really talented defensive coordinators who could no doubt put together a really interesting sort of offensive coaching setup. So, yeah.
Yeah, my
Falco's
second sort of point
Yeah.
question off the back of this as well, and again, this might be singing to the choir a little bit here, but in terms of like winning games and like the sort of quarterback situation, it seems that the Falcons are just about winning too many games to stop them from getting a real answer at quarterback. Because like, what's the plan there? I know you don't want to turn around and say, oh yeah, we're just tanking, now, because that doesn't generally happen too often, especially this early on in the season. But you've already won 4 games, and that's pretty much going to write you out of the real top, prizes in terms of the quarterback market. Like, where do you go from here, sort of thing? Because it seems like they tried to sort of make the plan backwards, sort of thing, like put all the skill position guys in, get a reasonable offensive line in, spend some money on that, and then drop the quarterback in. But they've just never dropped the quarterback in. When are you going to get the opportunity to do that if you're winning 4, 5, 6, 7 games every year?
Well, yeah, I mean, this has been the thing since the beginning. So, as I said, we've had 2 up until this season. We've had 2 7-10 sort of seasons, and in both seasons, we have been in the playoff picture. Not even on the also in frame, but in the playoff picture on the NFL.com playoff picture website. Right up until the last month. Last season, it was. For the division title. This season is going to be again for the division title. It's I cannot stress enough how mad the NFC South is. Like the Saints and the Falcons are 1 and 2. They have yet to play each other. So that's the reason. That's the thing splitting them, I think, at the moment. Well, I think the Saints probably have a better record. Either way, the fact that they're in a weak division means that they are always in with a chance of making the playoffs. And for a team that hasn't made the playoffs since 2017 and hasn't hosted a playoff game in it's no longer a brand new stadium, but their $1 billion stadium since it opened, there's probably a bit of push from ownership to go, we've got to fill some seats here because this stadium's we've got to get some people through the door. But also, you can't really build a culture. If you're a new head coach, you're trying to build something without a great deal of sort of finance behind you. You can't really build a culture without sort of wins to back it up or being competitive to back it up. So I think that's probably been the reason why, as a fan, I'd have preferred 4 and 13 seasons rather than 7 and 10 seasons, because we might be in that position. Not to do the I told you so stuff, but I was very much in the draft a quarterback camp in the year that they took Kyle Pitts. I'd have still gone with Justin Fields, even now, actually. I don't know what the answer is at quarterback kind of long term. You're right. If they can, there's still a very feasible chance that they can turn this ship around this season. Like, they can easily. You look at the teams that they're playing for the rest of the year, and you're like, they could win every game. And if they do, they're out of that conversation for a top quarterback, but they're probably in the market for, I don't know, Ryan Tannehill or something. Like, that's exciting to think about. Kyler Murray or like Justin Fields if the Bears decide to move on, depending on where they're drafting. So that's probably the market they have. But yeah, it is a very strangely constructed roster, but it makes sense when you look at how much belief they had in Desmond Ridder. You kind of go, well, he's a 3rd-round quarterback who's supposed to be quite safe. If they can just put him in a situation where all he has to do is hit the guys that are really, really tall, that's a win. And you can make that, but obviously it's not necessarily worked out that way. So weirdly constructed roster. Again, that's not necessarily Arthur Smith's fault, but he's the guy coaching these guys. So that's where the buck doesn't stop, but certainly you hold a large portion of the blame as to where we are at the moment, losing to the Vikings in the manner that we did. But yeah.
So in a way, it's the division's fault that you get a few more wins than you probably should.
Every single team was good for like a 3. Well, every single team was good for about 3 years, and then everybody ran out of money at the same time. Now everybody's bad.
It seems like
everybody's been equally bad, but also just kind of looking at it, going, we could be in a playoff game. We could lose to the Cowboys in week 1. but yeah, it's this is week 9 is well, week 9 of year 3 was the point in which it kind of stopped being a it can turn around thing, and it's this might actually be a problem thing.
Yeah, no, it's a situation that's absolutely dying for Kirk Cousins in free agency, in my opinion.
If Kirk Cousins hadn't have been injured in the way that he had, I would have been. I would absolutely have taken that scenario. I'm not as sold on the idea of Kirk Cousins coming off of a horrific ankle injury at the age of 37, 38 now, but I mean, it's got to be better than what we're seeing at the moment. So yeah,
and that's all it feels like it needs from an outsider looking in, considering the skill position players that are, highly drafted, the offensive line that's had some money spent on it. It just needs a guy to be competent and experienced,
move the ball.
Maybe a bit more of a creative mind offensive coordinator, but that's not going to happen until Al Smith goes, I guess.
Well, that's so yeah. I mean, another conversation for another day. But I have my theory as to how next season goes, and it is instead of firing Arthur Smith, they tell him to hire a passing game coordinator, and then it just becomes a bit of a power struggle between GM and head coach, and then it obviously gets ugly because it always does. So I'm looking forward to that, and whichever generational head coach we pass up in the process.
spoken by a very downbeat man by the time of things, and I'm only standing a little bit upbeat because we don't play till tonight as we record. I'm sure I'll be in the same manner, because going back to Mike Tomlin, he's kind of like the anti-Falcons and Chargers guys, and he just snatches victories from the jaws of defeat, whereas we're kind of the opposite from that. So yeah, can kind of see where you're coming from, feel where you're coming from as well.
Every year I look at the Pittsburgh Steelers and I go, this might be the year that they sort of have a really bad season, and then they might want to tear it down, and then we might get Mike Tomlin, and I get really excited 2 weeks before the season starts, and then I actually watch the Pittsburgh Steelers, and they're so boring, they're so awful to watch, but they just keep winning. I'm like, man, I would kill for games as boring as this.
Yeah, especially when you come out on the win side quite a lot because of the head coach, and he's just absolute wizardry, like I say, in terms of how he just gets his team to play and his defense to play and just make plays at the right time. Like, God, I kill for that. But anyway, we should stop wallowing a little bit more now and move on into our games of the week. I'll let you kick off this one, since I went first on the previous one. But yeah, you've got the Cowboys and Eagles, which was a fantastic game in the late.
Yeah, felt like the easy choice. I felt like before you'd sent over the document, I was like, well, I've got to find something else because that. But no, easy win. Excellent game. Really, really enjoyable game because both teams were by and large exceptional. I couldn't believe how poised Dak Prescott, who has come under a lot. I've got a lot of time for Dak Prescott as somebody who he seems to get a lot of unnecessary stick because. Wins are not a quarterback statistic, but they're a stick to beat him with. Like, he plays for one of the most decorated franchises in NFL history, and they haven't won a Super Bowl long before he joined them. And it's almost as if a lot of people have decided that's his fault. But I know I like him. I think he's really good, and he makes a lot of really smart decisions. He takes some weird sacks, and that was the case again yesterday. I thought when push came to shove, the Eagles' defense decided when they wanted to win the game. I had to screenshot it because I couldn't quite believe the sequence of events at the end of the game. I talked last week about was it the Cardinals' defeat where it was just a ridiculous sort of ending. This one was equally ridiculous because at one point, with very little time on the clock, let me just get the time. Where is it? There it is. 5 seconds. No, that's a lie. That's a barefaced lie. 27 seconds on the clock. The Dallas Cowboys are at the Philadelphia 6, down by 5 points. So a touchdown wins them the game. And you're thinking they're going to do it. They're going to actually come back in in Philadelphia, they're going to win, and they're going to really take this division all the way. And then it's a false start, and then it's a sack, and then it's and it's like, oh my God, what are you doing? A lot of that's not. I mean, it's not entirely on Dak Prescott's fault. I mean, as I say, the Eagles' defense decided when they were going to win, and they decided they were going to win in the most dramatic fashion possible. But to be 6 yards from the end zone, and then to end up 22 yards from the end zone, like 20 seconds later, is just stunning incompetence. That's Mike McCarthy football, if in a nutshell. But no, I really enjoyed it. The Eagles are an offensive juggernaut. We talked about AJ Brown last week. They decided that they're going to start throwing the ball to Smith now, which I really appreciate. As I've taken Smith out of my team, nice one. Jalen Hurts is a really good quarterback, and again, if we talk about players that couldn't have gone into a better position, I don't think he could have landed in a better position than he did it in sort of Philadelphia, because they have tailor-made that offense to him. But I've got a lot of time for Dak Prescott. I thought the Cowboys did a really, really admirable job. That's a loss that's going to hurt them, because they had that game. They were up, and they had the ball at the end to win it. That is the situation that you want if you are a quarterback. You want the ball at the end with the opportunity to win the game, and they didn't get it done. But it was a thriller. It was far more of a thriller than I was sort of expecting to be. Like I said earlier, my NFL Sunday ends at about 11:30. This was a game where I went to bed and sort of flicked on Game Pass and just kind of watched it from bed, because I had to go to bed. But I didn't want to miss the ending, and didn't want to read about it through tweets. So yeah, that was my game. That was my game. I enjoyed that one.
Yeah, great game between two good teams, two teams that have been really good all season. As much as in terms of the division, it's damaging because the Eagles are now 3 games ahead, 8-1. Really, in terms of the playoff hopes for Dallas, they're not. It's not too far dented, because they still got 5 wins. There's only the Eagles and the Lions ahead of them in that score. So they're going to get a wild card spot, of some description, and then we might get this again as a rematch, which would be great, because two good teams, like I say, lots of star power on both sides of the ball for both teams as well. Both teams can beat you with offense. Both teams can beat you with defense as well. So, like I say, all power to these teams, and they've got everything going for them. And again, both, maybe Dallas, I don't know. I was going to say both are primed for big playoff runs. There's just something missing for Dallas, isn't there? I think maybe it does center around Mike McCarthy a little bit. Because they've got everything else. And I think, again, maybe going back to a little bit with the conversation we just had about the Falcons as well, they just tweak things in the coaching. Maybe they could be a true contender right up there. I don't know.
It's just when at no point during Mike McCarthy, I've got no beef with Mike McCarthy. I think he was fine at Green Bay. They probably should have won more games than they did. They certainly should have sort of had more deep playoff runs than they did. And I think it's coming to a fruition a little bit with Dallas. We're kind of seeing, is it a mindset thing? Is it just the way that his teams are prepared? Because wherever he goes, they appreciate they won the Super Bowl in Green Bay in 2011, but like Aaron Rodgers was really good. And as much as I like Dak Prescott, he's not Aaron Rodgers. So kind of like, how much of it is him? How much of it is the talent that he is overseeing? It's an interesting one. But you can't deny that they are a winning team. They win lots of games. They get themselves into sort of that playoff situation, and then something happens. Something always happens. But yeah, it is. I think it's something to keep notice, especially if Dan Quinn gets head coaching sort of opportunities or interviews. I quite like Dan Quinn still, and I would be interested to see if Jerry Jones is the sort of person to go, well, we don't want to lose him, but we also realize that he is going to be a head coach, so let's make him our head coach kind of thing. That doesn't happen ever. But that would be super interesting to see if that conversation ever takes place.
I am, thank you. He's in a weird basket, isn't he, as a potential head coaching candidate? He potentially could be in that conversation come the end of the season, but because he's not one of those young offensive geniuses like Ben Johnson or Mike McDaniels was previously. He's been there, he's done it. He's having a second crack of the whip, and he's a defensive guy as well. So how teams are going to feel about that, I don't know, but he's probably is creeping up there because Dallas's defense has been that good for that long. So yes, it's an interesting one. My game of the week is the Dolphins versus Chiefs as well. So we've already talked about this a little bit in passing. So let's get right into it then. So this one, everyone wanted it to be this offensive sort of shootout, a la the Rams and Chiefs from a few years ago. And outside of the first drive for Kansas City, it really wasn't that offensive masterclass, but it was an extremely intriguing game nonetheless. I think it really toed and it froed. There was times where I just thought, the Chiefs are just out of sight because they got up early, and the Dolphins still weren't moving the ball too well. And then there was a time in the second half where I thought, the Dolphins are definitely going to bring this back now. It didn't quite happen. It had some turnovers at vital times, which I think aided that, especially the Mahomes fumble late on in the game. I thought that was a time when it seemed like the Dolphins definitely could come back into it. But also, the incredible lateral play that the Chiefs D scored on with, I think it was Brian Cook, wasn't it, who ran it down the sideline and took it back for 6. Just a game that had a lot of the atmosphere, like I said earlier. Not too many points, but still some great throws from each quarterback, still some great plays from both sides of the ball on sort of both teams. And I just thought this is a couple of things, really. A blueprint on how to defend this Dolphins offense, first and foremost. Get physical with them and get in the feast. Don't back off and kind of give them 20 yards to run into. Get physical with them at the line. I'm sure a lot of teams will kind of look to copy that. The Chargers did it last year. They didn't do it in week 1 this year, which was strange. And that's when the Dolphins kind of had a bit of a downturn on offense, when that blueprint was put out. So I wonder if the Chiefs have done that again. And second of all, the second thing that I want to take from this again is that it's time to recognize that the best side of the ball at the moment for the Chiefs is the defense, and how good this defense is as well. From front to back, it's not really, Chris Jones aside, a defense awash with stars, but still one of the best defenses in the league, and they have, kept the clamps on the Dolphins offense, who scored 70 points during the season and has had everyone, including ourselves, talking about them every single week, saying how amazing they are and how well schemed they are and how fast they are and how much star talent they've got and how Tua's an MVP candidate. And the Chiefs, of all teams, the team that everyone just associates with Patrick Mahomes and fun offense and Travis Kelce and scoring loads of points, it's actually the team to, like I say, put the clamps on them and bring them down to earth, maybe. So yeah, like I say, I thought it had it all from a drama point of view, and I hope we get a rerun in the playoffs between these two that gives them a chance to sort of see how these two react to each other.
Yeah, I think one of the sort of the underrated stories of the season, as you say, is the Chiefs' defense. I mean, they've always been pretty good. They've always been like pretty competent, but they've never been one of those sort of elite units. Well, not since Mahomes has been there, sort of quarterback at least. This season they've just kind of turned up a notch, and they've been incredibly fun to watch, but also incredibly effective. That defensive touchdown is the Chiefs are the only team that can do that. They can get away with that. Like, in the first half of a game to just sort of like, because they knew what they were doing. He was looking for the pass backwards from the moment he got the ball. So like they planned it apparently. And yeah, only team in the world in the league that can get away with it. Chiefs offense is a weird one because, like you say, you liken them to, or you expect this high-powered, high-scoring sort of bundles of yards at all times sort of offense, and they've not really clicked as much as they have done in the past couple of years. Obviously, Eric Bieniemy is no longer the offensive coordinator or offensive assistant or whatever they're calling it. He never called plays, but like he was the coordinator that brought back sort of Matt Nagy, and I can only assume there's still a little bit of a little bit of a sort of reacquainting themselves involved, kind of there. That's the only thing I can point to. Plus, Patrick Mahomes, outside of Travis Kelce, is thrown to guys with seemingly an inability to catch, which is incredible that they've made it this far in the NFL. The Dolphins, I think this defeat opens a line of questioning on where they are, not just now, but kind of into the rest of the season, because they don't seem to be able to beat the good teams, the big teams. Like whenever it comes up to one of these sort of marquee sort of matchups, they seem to get overawed. And I don't know if that's a mentality issue, and I don't know if that's clearly not a talent issue, because they are as talented as anybody in the NFL on both sides of the ball. But they don't seem to, you can't seem to trust them when it comes to their game against the Chiefs or whoever. And that's going to sort of hurt them. I would love to see this game again in January and in America. When the game kicked off and it was sort of immediately 7-0, I'm like, okay, we've got ourselves a shootout. And I wonder how much of that, whether that would have happened if neither team had travelled. As much as kind of wax lyrical somewhat of the sort of the international games, it's undeniable that the travel is going to affect the players somewhat in their ability to execute. And again, whether or not that affected the Dolphins or not, they'll make excuses. Well, they won't make excuses, but they can make excuses if they want to. And I would like to see this game again without that sort of traveling. But it does make me question where they are, whether or not they are actually capable of making that run. If they are going to be one of those teams that get into the sort of the final four or into sort of championship weekend or whatever, who are the Dolphins is my question. Are they good or are they frauds? No, they're not frauds. They are really good, but they come up against these good teams, and I think they need to sort of trust themselves a bit more. It was a good game, and I'm glad that it was a good game that took place over here. And you're right, that could very easily be a championship game in sort of at the end of January, and we saw that in Frankfurt, which is cool. But yeah, no, again, really, really good game, and we'll see whether or not the Patriots and the Colts can live up to it next week. I no doubt they can. But yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure the Dolphins, we're going to find out with them, aren't we? Like you say, come January, whether they can beat the big teams, and that's up to them to kind of prove it. You don't want to be the champions of the regular season at the end of the day, do you? So we'll see. But yeah, let's move on into our memeable moments. Obviously, we all saw earlier in the week the Bills injury report with Rasul Douglas, where he was not practicing because he'd, just got here. Then obviously we saw on Sunday Night Football the Bills face the Bengals, who obviously I declared back last week, and it seems like they are. You know, they went ahead and beat the Bills 24-18, and I just feel like the Bills defense is in a bit of trouble. So I liken Rasul Douglas to this gif that goes around of the guy walking into a burning home with a stack of pizzas. Because they're struggling, and if Josh Allen's going to have to do it all if they're going to win it all this season, because they've lost a few guys to injury, Matt Lamano, Trey White in particular, and it's going to have to be all offense for the Bills so far. So yeah, this is Rasul Douglas arriving at the Bills training practice with his stack of pieces.
Yeah, no, can't. Yeah. I haven't got anything else to say of that other than I hope he's ready to put the work in, because they're gonna need him to.
Go ahead. What's yours?
Yeah, so pouring into the deepest recesses of my Star Wars knowledge here, we've got Newt Gunray from Star Wars Episode 1, The Phantom Menace, literally just saying, is that legal? It's not really a meme. I see it go around every now and then. It's just kind of funny a little bit, and that's my reaction to watching CJ Stroud throw for 470 yards and 5 touchdowns in a victory over the Buccaneers. I didn't know young quarterbacks were allowed to throw that many yards and that many touchdowns. I didn't know that was something they could do. Felt illegal. It felt illegal to watch him just slice up this team with about 25 seconds to go. What a player, by the way! What a drive that was right at the end. Texans are in a good place. I think. I don't think that's too much of a hot take. But yeah, is that legal? Are you allowed to do that? That doesn't seem fair as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, he's a special player, isn't he? Already, and that final drive, like you say, just epitomised it all, didn't it? Yeah, maybe we'll talk about CJ Stroud throughout the week on the touchdown.co.uk in some articles as we move on. I'm sure we will. But and then Table's not with us this evening, but he wanted to send his meme in of Taysom Hill. It just says, "What position do you play football?" Which I guess is just homage to Taysom Hill throwing a touchdown, being the Chiefs. The Saints' leading rusher, and also receiving a touchdown as well. So yeah, all rounder in every way. But yeah, no, some great memes, and yeah, that is like you say, into the deep parts of Star Wars knowledge. Because I had to look that up, and I was like, "What is that?" I was like, "Okay, yeah, it's Star Wars."
Just it's this random character from the film that no one liked. It's like, oh well, you know.
So as we finish off then with our Monday Night Football predictions, last week we had Tabe's team. The Raiders went to the Lions, and we all got a point for the Lions winning. None of us were insane enough to want to vote for the Raiders to win. And I also got an extra point because I said Jahmyr Gibbs would go over 150 yards, which he just about did on the ground. So kudos to me for that. And then again, we move into a week where we've got one of our teams on the docket here, where we Monday Night Football with the Chargers. Playing at the Meadowlands Stadium tonight against the Jets. Take it away with your prediction. I'll go last with this one.
All right, so I've got the Chargers to win 16-10. That Jets defense is like super legitimate. It's just whether or not they can just move the ball. And I feel bad. I always feel bad whenever I talk about Zach Wilson because he gets so much stick anyway, but I never feel particularly confident whenever he's involved in a game. My not necessarily doesn't feel like a crazy prediction because it seems to happen a lot, but I've got Zach Wilson throws an interception with less than 30 seconds to play, trying to make something happen to put his team in a winning position, and it doesn't come off. So 16-10. Low scoring as they always are, and yeah.
I will take it because I've got Tabe's prediction as well. Despite him not being here, he's gone for Chargers 17, Jets 14. Herbert with 2 picks, 2 touchdowns, and 200 yards. And it says a lot for this game that Tabe saying that the Chargers might score 17 points is the highest that anyone has put for either team to score in this game. It just has low scoring game, messy defensive battle all over it, really, doesn't it? Because the Jets defense is very good and the Jets offense is very bad, despite the Chargers defense being quite bad as well. I've gone for probably the epitome of everything that I've just said, really, in that I've gone for a 12-9 Jets win with no touchdowns being scored. It's all going to be kicks, which would be great for my fantasy team. So I've got Cameron Dicker. So that's absolutely fine by me. And I kind of need to have a good game as well for my win. But yeah, that's kind of how I go. And obviously I'm kind of trying to reverse jinx a little bit, betting on the Jets. So we'll kind of see. We'll see. I'll take no points if I get the points in real life, let's say. So that's everything for us this week. Usual stuff is coming up on the touchdown this week. So we've got winners and losers. 5 wide that we've already kind of alluded to in a couple of ways. Can't wait for the Falcons rant part 2 on that. And we've got much more, obviously, throughout the NFL and the college scene as well as Canadian football and our betting and fantasy stuff as well. So yeah, thanks for checking us out. Thanks for sticking with us. Thanks for listening. And like I say, we'll see you next time.